We all know the story of the first moon landing, Neil Armstrong's legendary steps, and the words that echoed across a silent planet. But what if I told you the moon landing almost never happened? What if it all hung on a single, desperate mission that nobody talks about? In the shadow of a deadly disaster, a forgotten crew of 3 men was about to risk everything to save a broken program. This is the true, untold story of the 7 days that changed space travel forever. The year was 1967, and the space race was a relentless, high-stakes sprint. The United States was desperately trying to fulfill President Kennedy's 1961 promise to land a man on the moon before the decade was out. This audacious goal had pushed NASA to its breaking point, culminating in the highly anticipated Apollo program. But a critical mission, Apollo 1, would reveal a fatal flaw in the system. The agency had enjoyed a long, successful run of manned missions, and a certain complacency had set in. The Apollo 1 crew, Commander Gus Grissom, Senior Pilot Ed White, and Pilot Roger Chaffee, were at Cape Kennedy, sealed inside the command module for a routine plugs-out test. The entire test was designed to simulate the launch countdown without any rocket fuel. It was supposed to be a simple dry run, but it became a crucible. At 6:31 p.m. on January 27, 1967, a spark from a wire inside the command module ignited a hellish fire. The pure oxygen environment, pressurized at 16.7 psi, turned the cabin into an inferno in mere seconds. The ground crew heard a final, chilling transmission from Grissom. "Fire. We have a fire in the cockpit." Then silence. The 3 astronauts were killed almost instantly. They were trapped inside a capsule that took the ground crew 5 minutes to pry open. Their deaths were the first on an American space mission. The Apollo 1 tragedy wasn't just a loss of 3 lives. It was a national crisis. The program, once a symbol of American ingenuity, was immediately grounded. An investigation revealed a slew of design and safety flaws, from the highly flammable materials to the complex inward-opening hatch. The public's trust in NASA plummeted. Congressional hearings threatened to cut funding, and the entire moonshot seemed doomed. The future of human spaceflight hinged on one thing: a new mission and a new crew willing to step into the same capsule that had killed their friends. In the wake of the Apollo 1 fire, NASA's leadership turned to 3 men who had been training for years. Commander Wally Schirra, a veteran of Mercury and Gemini flights, lunar module pilot Don Eisel, and mission pilot Walter Cunningham. This wasn't a choice for a glorious moon landing. This was a choice for a dangerous and crucial test flight. They were the last hope for a crippled program, tasked with flying a mission that was far more important than anyone on the ground understood. Their objective was simple on paper, but terrifying in reality: fly the first crewed flight of the newly redesigned Apollo command and service modules. It was a rigorous 11-day test flight to verify every system that had been fixed after the Apollo 1 fire. The public saw it as a return to space, but the astronauts saw it as a test of life and death. The pressure wasn't just to succeed. It was to prove that a man could fly into space without burning to death. The danger was immense. Every piece of wiring had been replaced, every switch redesigned, and the new hatch opened outward in just seconds. But despite all the fixes, they were about to fly a spaceship that no one had ever piloted in orbit. They were flying on the untested promise of a redesign. These 3 men knew they were flying in the shadow of their fallen friends. And every second they were in space was a moment of incredible courage. On October 11, 1968, the Apollo 7 mission finally launched. The entire world held its breath. Unlike the triumphant launches of the past, this one was tense, filled with anxiety and fear. But the rocket soared flawlessly into the sky. The first hurdle was cleared, but the real test, the 7 days that would define the mission, had just begun. They were in orbit, and for the first time in 21 months, an American crew was flying a spacecraft. The crew's courage was immediately put to the test. A few days into the mission, all 3 astronauts developed severe head colds. In the zero-gravity environment, mucus couldn't drain from their sinuses. It was miserable, painful, and it added to the stress of an already high-stakes mission. But this wasn't the biggest challenge. The crew had no intention of being just passive passengers. They had strict orders to follow, but when they believed an order would compromise the mission, they openly disobeyed. Communication between the spacecraft and mission control was tense. During a crucial test, mission control asked the crew to wear their helmets. An unnecessary safety protocol in the crew's opinion. Commander Shira, frustrated with the discomfort and the lack of trust from the ground, famously replied, "You get a helmet on, and you get a feel for what we're going through. Don't you try to ram this down our throats." It was a verbal mutiny, a sign of the immense pressure and a testament to the crew's confidence in their own judgment. These weren't just simple disagreements. The crew's defiance on certain protocols and their candid, often blunt feedback about the spacecraft systems proved vital. They were testing everything from the inside out, reporting every single flaw. While the public only saw the success behind the scenes, these 3 men were fighting to prove their courage and their expertise. They were the ones on the front line, and their honesty helped solve problems that no one on the ground could have anticipated. After 11 days in space, the crew of Apollo 7 safely splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean. On the surface, it was just a successful mission. But for NASA, it was nothing short of a miracle. The relief was palpable. The astronauts were greeted with cheers and smiles, but their real victory wasn't celebrated with a parade. Their victory was a technical one, and it was a promise kept. The data they brought back was invaluable. They had thoroughly tested the command and service modules, pushing them to their limits. Their candid feedback about the flaws and their in-flight fixes were crucial for the engineers on the ground. The mission proved that the command module was a safe and reliable spacecraft. It showed that NASA had taken the lessons from the Apollo 1 tragedy to heart and had completely redesigned the ship. The success of Apollo 7 was the linchpin of the entire moon program. Without their mission, there would have been no Apollo 8, the first crewed mission to orbit the moon. The bold decision to send men beyond low Earth orbit was a direct result of the confidence instilled by Schirra, Eisel, and Cunningham. Their 11 days in space weren't about reaching a new destination. They were about proving it was possible to get there at all. The 3 men of Apollo 7 were never as famous as the crews that followed. They never walked on the moon, but their courage and their defiance in the face of immense pressure were the true acts of heroism. They were the bridge to the impossible, the brave few who flew the mission that no one remembers, but without which no one would ever have landed on the moon. The crew of Apollo 7 never had a parade. They never became household names like Armstrong or Aldrin. But their story holds the most important lesson of all. True heroism is not always about a giant leap. Sometimes it's about the essential, difficult, and unglamorous work that no one will ever see. Walter Cunningham and his crew were not just astronauts. They were pioneers who had the courage to step into a broken system and fix it from the inside. They knew the risk, they faced the immense pressure, and they did the hard, honest work that made the moon landing possible. Their story reminds us that the most critical steps in any great journey are often the most overlooked. Their legacy is not measured in lunar footprints, but in the trust they restored to an entire nation. They showed that true leadership isn't just about bold declarations. It's about facing your fears and proving that even after a great fall, you can still reach for the stars. So, what's the most important lesson you learned from the crew of Apollo 7? Was it about resilience, courage, or the importance of doing the hard work that no one else sees? Let us know in the comments below. If you were inspired by this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that teach you English and change your perspective. Thank you for watching.